Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission here is pretty simple. We take dense source material, the articles, the research, the ancient texts, and we break them down.
We try to find the clearest, most profound nuggets of insight.
Exactly. We want to ensure you walk away truly well-informed.
And today we are undertaking an exploration into a truly challenging piece of ancient literature.
Oh, it's definitely challenging.
It is. It deals head-on with systemic corruption, the nature of human depravity, and, well, this raw, desperate cry for divine accountability.
That's right. Our source material today is focused entirely on Psalm 58. It's a psalm of David, and we're using the King James Version. And this isn't just, contemplative poetry.
Not at all.
This is a spiritual declaration of war against injustice.
Yeah.
It addresses the chief musician, and it has these inscriptions, Al-Tashith, which means do not destroy, and Miktam.
Right, and Miktam is often associated with a golden or an enduring kind of writing.
Those inscriptions are fascinating.
They are. And they're critical to the tone, which is something the commentary provided by the UNFIJ team really dedicates some time to.
Okay.
The term miktam suggests something precious, something to be kept permanently. A record.
And Al-Tashith, do not destroy.
Ugh.
That seems almost contradictory, doesn't it?
It does. It's a plea for fiery justice, but at the same time, it's commanded not to destroy. This really sets the stage for a prayer that is, well, it's intense, but it ultimately recognizes that God's preservation plan is at work, even in the middle of a request for judgment.
So even in David's suffering, the focus is on a structured, enduring, and ultimately controlled form of justice.
Not just reckless vengeance.
Exactly. Our mission for this extensive deep dive, then, is to extract those critical insights from the source material. We're looking at the architecture of divine justice.
What the psalm teaches about the depth of human sinfulness, how corruption actually operates.
And why the certainty of God's final action should anchor us in turbulent times.
This deep dive, informed by the analysis of the You Need Faith in Jesus team, is going to expose the calculated wickedness of those in power.
It really does. It peels back that polite public mask to reveal the rot underneath.
And it leads us, step by step, toward the powerful conclusion that the God we serve is actively judging and rewarding right here in the earth.
Okay, let's unpack this and jump straight into the challenge, because David, he wastes no time. He confronts the problem head on.
He really does.
We begin with a direct, challenging question. It's aimed squarely at the people who are supposed to be the moral and legal bedrock of the nation.
It sets a tone of profound disillusionment right from the start.
So what's the verse?
The first verse from the King James Version reads, "Do ye indeed speak righteousness, O congregation? Do ye judge uprightly, O ye sons of men?" That's Psalm 58, verse 1.
The force of that question just hangs in the air, doesn't it? But we need to be clear on who he's actually talking to here.
That's a crucial point.
Because when modern listeners hear congregation, our mind instantly goes to a church service, a religious gathering.
Right. But the source material clarifies that the meaning here is tied to political and judicial power.
So who is it?
The congregation here, from the Hebrew word oda, it refers to an assembly of those in authority. So judges, rulers, high officials.
The people entrusted with governing and administering the law impartially.
Exactly. David is not addressing the general public here. He is interrogating what would be, for them, the supreme court of the land. He's asking, are your public pronouncements really based on righteousness? Are your legal decisions genuinely upright?
And the consensus across the commentary is that this is deeply sarcastic.
Oh, absolutely.
He isn't actually looking for information. He's making a public accusation. He already knows the answer is a resounding no.
He's using the psalm as a highly public spiritual indictment. He's forcing their hypocrisy out into the open for everyone to see.
And that public exposure is key.
It is. The principle at stake is foundational. God delegates authority to leaders precisely so they can maintain order and protect the weak.
So when those leaders become the source of oppression themselves,
it's a profound betrayal of divine trust. The standard God holds them to is his own character, justice, and righteousness.
And the commentary from the UNFIJ in Jesus team points out that this principle isn't just a one-off, it's applied universally throughout Scripture.
Right. It's not just a passing critique in a moment of distress. We see this fierce condemnation against corrupt leadership echoed again and again.
The source material gives a parallel for this, right?
It does. A very powerful one in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 23, which shares the exact same structure of complaint against wicked rulers.
What does it say?
It says, Thy princes are rebellious and companions of thieves. Everyone loveth gifts and followeth after rewards. They judge not the fatherless, neither doth the cause of the widow come unto them.
Wow. What stands out there is just how specific the neglect is. These leaders aren't just, taking kickbacks. They are actively choosing to ignore the most vulnerable people in their society.
The fatherless and the widow.
Their preoccupation with bribes and gifts means they're not just failing at their job, they are deliberately causing harm by doing nothing. They've weaponized apathy.
That's a crucial distinction. The sin is twofold. There's the act of corruption, the gifts and rewards, and then there's the neglect of their primary duty.
Impartial justice for the weak.
Right. So when Psalm 58 asks if they speak righteousness and judge uprightly, the answer is no, because their judgment is literally for sale. Or worse, it's reserved only for those who can afford it.
And this systemic failure highlights a deep crisis of leadership.
It does. Which raises a powerful question for you, the listener. While most of us aren't heads of state or sitting on the Supreme Court,
Right.
the commentary provided by the UNFIJ team emphasizes that this passage is still a call to self-examination. It's about our own spheres of influence.
So even in a much smaller context.
Exactly. Every one of us holds some level of authority.
Yeah.
Maybe it's over your children or your team at work or even just your public platform on social media.
Right.
The practical application is this. Are we judging uprightly in our small domain? Are we speaking truth in our conversations? When we're faced with a choice to advance our own interests or act fairly, which scale do we choose?
I think the real challenge there is the temptation of convenience. It's just so much easier to overlook a small injustice if it benefits us or our group.
Of course.
But David's challenge demands an active choice toward righteousness, even when it costs us something.
The practical step suggested is this kind of active moral auditing.
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, am I speaking truth and acting fairly, reflecting God's character? Or am I prioritizing self-preservation or small gains?
This principle creates accountability no matter what your rank is.
Right. If we recognize the moral collapse when those above us abuse their power, we have to ensure we don't replicate that same calculated self-interest in the authority we hold, however limited it is.
And that kind of moral reflection is fundamental to the teaching we find in the source material.
It is. This constant pressure of moral auditing naturally leads us to the next profound observation David makes. If the outward acts of these rulers are corrupt, where does that corruption actually start?
And David moves so quickly from that rhetorical question to a definitive, damning conclusion. He reveals the source of this public injustice.
He does. It's not an error of judgment, he says. It's a deliberate choice rooted in their inner being.
This is the revelation of the heart.
It is. It's the moment David removes any possibility of this being an innocent mistake. The King James Version reads, "Yea, in heart ye work wickedness. Ye weigh the violence of your hands in the earth." That's Psalm 58, verse 2.
In heart you work wickedness. That phrasing is so specific, it tells us the injustice isn't a byproduct of incompetence.
Wow.
It's a manufactured product. It's intentionally worked like a craftsman shaping metal.
It really speaks to a deep-seated malice. The wickedness is conceived internally, within the seat of motivation and intent, the heart. It happens there before it ever manifests as physical oppression by the hands.
But it's that second half of the verse,
Yes.
as highlighted by the You Need Faith in Jesus team commentary, that offers what is maybe the most chilling metaphor of the whole song.
Ye weigh the violence of your hands.
Let's spend some time on that image of weighing violence. We just established that scales are the universal symbol of justice, of finding that perfect balance of truth.
And here, these corrupt rulers have completely subverted that very instrument. They are using the scales not to balance truth against falsehood,
But to what?
but to calculate the precise amount of cruelty and oppression necessary to achieve their selfish goals. They measure out the damage.
So their evil isn't just passionate or reckless.
No, it's cold, it's methodical, and it's quantified.
Wow. They're acting like engineers of suffering.
That's a good way to put it.
They calculate the minimal amount of violence required to seize a property, or silence a critic, or neglect the widow, just enough to ensure their own position is maximized while minimizing the public backlash.
And that premeditation is the sign of a hardened heart. It shows an absolute commitment to evil. They've turned their system of governance, which was designed for order, into an efficient machine for oppression.
And this methodical approach is exactly what other prophetic books condemned.
Absolutely. The source material draws a very strong connection to Micah, chapter 2, verse 1, which perfectly illustrates this mental state of plotting evil long before the action ever occurs.
What does that verse say?
The cross-reference is unavoidable. Micah says, "Woe to them that devise iniquity, and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hand."
Devise iniquity upon their beds. That suggests the planning happens in a quiet, isolated place.
A contemplative setting, maybe right before sleep or just as they wake up.
They use the time that should be for rest and self-reflection to, what? To sharpen their malice? To measure out their future violence?
Exactly. By the time morning comes, the plan's locked in, and the hand just executes the calculated design. It reveals the root of all external wickedness.
The internal, selfish plot.
The actions we see are simply the inevitable overflow of a deliberate, corrupt internal life. And this provides the crucial lesson identified by the UNFIJ in Jesus' team commentary.
Which is?
The absolute necessity of guarding the heart.
So if the problem starts on the inside, the solution has to start there too. What's the practical step that comes out of this analysis?
The practical step is a kind of spiritual self-defense. If sin is first conceived in the heart, then we have to actively and regularly audit our motives and our desires.
How do you do that?
The listener has to ask the Holy Spirit to search their inner plans. Are my ambitions rooted in selfless service? Or are they subtly contaminated by the measured pursuit of power, or maybe malice against others? We have to ensure our internal scales are balanced by God's righteousness before our hands carry anything out.
It's the difference between reacting poorly to a bad situation versus calculating how to exploit a situation for selfish gain.
Exactly. It moves the focus from circumstantial failure to moral premeditation.
And this realization that all corruption begins in the heart leads us to the logical next step, asking why the heart is so universally inclined toward measuring out evil in the first place.
And this is where David steps back from the specific corrupt judges to deliver a poetic but profound statement on the universal condition of mankind.
This verse is central to understanding the theology of the entire psalm.
It is. The KJV reads, "The wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they be born, speaking lies." That's Psalm 58, verse 3.
Estranged from the womb. That is an arresting image. We need to be careful with the interpretation here, though.
We do.
Especially that phrase, speaking lies as soon as they be born. As the source material from the You Need Faith in Jesus team points out, this is highly charged poetic language.
That clarification is vital. David is using powerful, dramatic hyperbole. He is not making a literal biological claim that newborn babies are immediately capable of articulating falsehoods.
Okay, so what is he saying?
He's making a theological statement about the fundamental disposition of the human soul. The inclination toward sinfulness and separation from God is inherent. It's present from the very beginning of our existence.
So David is poetically affirming the doctrine of original sin, the idea that even before we commit our first conscious, deliberate sin, we are already spiritually broken.
Already inclined away from righteousness. The
Okay.
capacity to choose righteousness has been corrupted at the source.
Exactly. The human condition is one of a fallen nature.
Which means that the wickedness displayed by those corrupt rulers in Jerusalem is not some kind of aberration. It is the natural, unhindered manifestation of a universal human reality. They are simply demonstrating what is present in all of us if it's left unchecked.
And the You Need Faith in Jesus team commentary is very clear on this point. It ties Psalm 58 directly to fundamental doctrinal statements.
Affirming that man by nature is sinful and that he has fallen from the original state.
This provides the systematic framework we need to understand David's raw poetry.
And we find the perfect theological corollary to this poetic declaration centuries later in Paul's writing.
So while David observed the symptom wickedness from the start, Paul provided the mechanism.
Precisely. That parallel helps ground this concept. Let's look at the book of Romans.
Okay.
Romans chapter 5, verse 12 clearly explains the consequence of inherited sin. It says, "Wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all has sinned."
So the entry point of sin was Adam.
Yes, and the consequence, this propensity toward estrangement, is passed down to every single person, including the kings and judges David condemns.
Which means that the powerful judge and the powerless beggar stand on the same corrupted foundation.
It strips away all grounds for human arrogance.
So if we all start estranged from the womb, what does that realization demand from us?
Humility. The realization that our hearts, left unchecked, are just as capable of weighing violence as those corrupt rulers. It has to lead us to a profound dependence on grace.
It confirms the universal need for redemption, for a savior.
Yes, the commentary emphasizes this truth is meant to produce a sense of shared brokenness and dependence, not superiority.
And that sets the stage for the next section perfectly, because if the source of the problem is innate, then the rejection of any potential cure must be deliberate.
They aren't just born broken, they are actively choosing to stay that way.
The Psalm's tone becomes incredibly intense here. David uses these dual metaphors to describe the toxicity and the obstinacy of the wicked.
He uses two images that are both shocking and culturally resonant. First, the nature of their influence, and second, their spiritual resistance. Verse 4 reads, "Their poison is like the poison of a serpent. They are like the deaf adder that stoppeth her ear."
And their refusal to be swayed is detailed even further in verse 5, which will not hearken to the voice of charmers, charming never so wisely.
Let's start with the snake venom. The commentary highlights that this isn't just a metaphor for lying.
It's more than that.
It's deadly influence. The rulings, the political maneuvers, the decisions made by these rulers are not just flawed or inconvenient, they are poisonous. They inflict destruction and spiritual death on those they target, just like venom rapidly destroys the body.
And this leads to that really insightful metaphor, the deaf adder. I want to pause here because this imagery deserves the full cultural context that the source material provides.
Absolutely. The deaf adder, or cobra, according to ancient Near Eastern belief and folklore, had a particular characteristic. It could supposedly make itself immune to the snake charmer's music by a deliberate act. The folklore held that the snake would physically press one ear against the earth and then plug the other ear with its tail.
That is a brilliant anecdote because it's not about a natural handicap.
Exactly. It's an image of willful, deliberate spiritual resistance. The charmer could play the most beautiful, persuasive, wise music, charming never so wisely. But the adder has made a physical, conscious choice to block out the truth entirely.
That is the core insight the "you need faith in Jesus" team analysis drives home. These corrupt leaders are not ignorant.
They are deliberately resistant. They have heard the calls for justice. They know the difference between right and wrong, but they have physically and spiritually plugged their ears because they are determined to follow their self-calculated evil path.
But wait a minute. If they're plotting and calculating violence, as it says in verse 2, doesn't calling them deaf let them off the hook a little bit?
That's an essential challenge.
It sounds like an excuse, as if they simply can't hear the truth, rather than that they are actively fighting against it.
But it's not an excuse. It's a description of the final stage of hardening. Their deafness is an active choice. They have so internalized their sin that correction becomes physically repulsive to them.
So they're stiff-necked, as the New Testament would say.
Precisely. They refuse the internal conviction that would disrupt their calculated plans. The resistance itself becomes a form of action.
We see this exact condemnation used by Stephen when he faced the religious leaders who were determined to silence the truth of the gospel.
That parallel is maybe the most powerful in the commentary. Stephen, just moments before his martyrdom, used this very language of willful resistance. In Acts chapter 7, verse 51, he says, "Ye stiff-necked and uncircumcised and hardened ears, ye do always resist the Holy Ghost, as your fathers did, so do ye."
Uncircumcised and hardened ears, that is the spiritual counterpart to the deaf adder plugging its ears. Their physical hearing was fine.
Perfectly fine. But their inner being, their heart and spirit, had built up scar tissue, deliberately blocking the life-changing truth and the convicting power of the Holy Ghost.
The core issue is always the same, whether it's ancient Israel or first century Jerusalem.
It's a refusal to be corrected, a determination to follow one's own path, regardless of wisdom or counsel or divine truth. The individual chooses their own self-interest over God's standard.
And this analysis leads to a really serious warning from the source material provided by the "You Need Faith in Jesus" team. If we see this resistance in the condemned, we have to vigilantly guard against it in ourselves.
The practical step for the listener here is critical. Guard against developing a stubborn or a stiff-necked spirit.
So what does that look like?
We have to maintain a soft heart and ears that remain open to God's word and wise counsel, even and especially when that counsel is uncomfortable or challenges our personal plans. If we plug our ears to correction, we begin that downward spiral toward calculating our own malice.
It's the essential humility required for growth. If we are truly dedicated to righteousness, we have to welcome the critique that ensures we are not accidentally measuring out violence.
And having thoroughly exposed the nature of this calculated, self-imposed evil, David now turns his attention from exposure to petition. He cries out for the only one capable of stopping such determined wickedness, God himself.
And now we arrive at the section of the psalm that is emotionally raw and theologically challenging. The imprecatory prayers, where
Yes.
David demands vivid, decisive judgment. We have to approach this not as a call for personal revenge, but as a desperate plea for divine intervention.
That is the proper lens. David is not taking the hammer of justice into his own hands.
Right.
He is handing it over to the only perfect judge. He's articulating the righteous anger that has to be channeled heavenward.
He's asking God to definitively end the destructive cycle.
He is. Let's look at the first physical demand in verse 6. Break their teeth, O God, in their mouth. Break out the great teeth of the young lions, O Lord.
Break their teeth! That is so visceral. Why the focus on teeth?
The teeth symbolize their destructive predatory power. The reference to the great teeth of the young lions identifies these rulers not just as corrupt officials, but as ravenous, destructive predators who are tearing apart the weak.
So he's praying for God to completely neutralize their ability to injure and consume their victims.
It's a prayer for the permanent cessation of their evil activity, a prayer for disarmament. They're rendered harmless, unable to tear their prey, which aligns with the goal of protecting the vulnerable.
Then the imagery shifts dramatically in verse 7. It moves from physical incapacitation to utter erasure and frustration of clans.
It does. Let them melt away as waters which run continually. When he bendeth his bow to shoot his arrows, let them be as cut in pieces.
Melting away like continually running water, that image implies disappearance, transience.
They're like a sudden flash, floods intense and powerful for a moment. But then they vanish, leaving dry, cracked earth behind. It's a wish for their influence to evaporate entirely.
And the second part focuses on their methodical evil from verse 2. They were carefully planning and calculating their schemes.
Represented here as arrows. David prays that their carefully executed plans be shattered, rendered null, and cut in pieces before they can even reach their target. Their calculated violence must come to absolutely nothing.
This leads to the most intense and frankly shocking pleas for total erasure in verse 8. The source material really compels us to examine this one closely.
Verse 8 is indeed striking. As a snail which melteth, let every one of them pass away, like the untimely birth of a woman, that they may not see the sun.
Okay, let's unpack the snail reference first. It's not immediately obvious to a modern listener.
In the ancient world, it was observed that the slime trail left by a snail, coupled with its seemingly ephemeral body, gave the illusion that the creature was dissolving. It looked like it was wasting away as it moved.
So David uses this to plead for dissolution, a gradual, utter fading from memory and existence.
He does. And the reference to the untimely birth is an incredibly powerful, desperate plea for nullification.
It's a prayer for total erasure.
Yes. That their life, their influence, and their wickedness should be completely removed, as if they had never existed and never saw the light of day to inflict harm.
And the combined effect of these three verses is a request for comprehensive, definitive, divine judgment.
One that protects the innocent by completely removing the perpetrators.
This intense desire for God to intervene and avenge injustice, it's often seen as a purely Old Testament thing. Yet our commentary, informed by the analysis of the UNFIJ in Jesus team, connects this prayer directly to the eternal longing for justice found in the New Testament.
And this connection proves the universality of the cry. The emotional demand for accountability does not disappear. In Revelation chapter 6, verse 10, we hear the saints who were martyred for their faith crying out from beneath the altar.
What do they say?
And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth?
The anguish is identical. How long, O Lord? They're asking for God to exercise his holy and true character by bringing judgment on the system that persecuted them. The imprecatory prayer is essentially the sanctified, persistent demand for the restoration of divine order.
And this provides the critical guidance for the listener today. When we witness injustice that sparks righteous anger, the You Need Faith in Jesus team commentary teaches us not to seize that anger for personal revenge.
So what do we do with it?
We channel that fierce desire for accountability into passionate prayer. We ask God to act, to stop the evil, and to protect the vulnerable. That is the legitimate, God-honoring response to profound injustice.
It acknowledges the intensity of the desire for justice while transferring the difficult, morally fraught execution of judgment to the only being capable of carrying it out without sin or error.
And having pleaded for this decisive action, David now assures those who are suffering that God's intervention, when it comes, will not be a slow, drawn-out affair.
It'll be shockingly swift.
Exactly, confounding human expectations. And he used an illustration drawn from ancient daily life that's often obscured to us now.
This is a remarkable piece of cultural insight.
It is. It has to be thoroughly explored to appreciate its genius. Verse 9 reads, "Before your pots can feel the thorns, he shall take them away as with a whirlwind, both living and in his wrath."
We need to decode this scene. What exactly does "before your pots can feel the thorns" mean? And how does that illustrate speed?
In ancient households, especially among the less wealthy, quick-burning materials were used for cooking. Thorns or dried brush were excellent kindling because they ignite instantly and burn extremely hot.
But they also burn out very quickly.
Right, so the scene David paints involves a cook setting up a fire, maybe placing dry thorns underneath a pot, expecting the heat to gradually transfer through the metal and bring the food to temperature.
The imagery focuses on the time required for heat transfer.
Precisely. Even with a rapid thorn fire, there's a measurable period before the clay or metal pot actually gets warm, the time it takes for the fire to build and the material to absorb the heat.
And what David says is,
David says that God's judgment is so swift, so overwhelming, that the whole scene, the thorns, the fire, the pot, and the wicked cook, is swept away by a whirlwind before the pot even has time to register the heat.
that is profound. It just demolishes the idea that the wicked will be allowed to finish their plans.
They are meticulously setting up their instruments of oppression, calculating their violence, getting their fire ready, and just when they believe success is inevitable,
When their pot is about to reach the boiling point of their malice.
God intervenes instantly.
The word whirlwind emphasizes the devastating speed and totality of the intervention.
It signifies an overwhelming, natural, and irresistible force. It's a sudden, unforeseen destruction that leaves nothing behind.
And this powerfully contradicts the common perception that God is slow or absent because the wicked often seem to succeed for a time.
It does. And our source material, analyzed by the UNFIJ in Jesus team, connects this rapid intervention directly to the consequence of willful deafness we discussed earlier.
Persistent, determined evil leads to sudden destruction.
Yes, the warning in Proverbs chapter 29, verse 1, is perfectly aligned with this mechanism of swift judgment. It says, "He that being often reproved hardeneth his neck shall suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy."
The deaf adder who hardens their neck and refuses wise counsel will not experience a slow, remediable decline.
They face a sudden, final destruction, like a whirlwind sweeping away the cooking fire mid-prep.
This illustration provides immense comfort to the believer who feels exhausted by waiting for justice.
It does. The practical application is this. Trust in God's timing. Do not mistake the delay for indifference. He can resolve the situation, dismantle a system of oppression, or defeat a determined enemy far more quickly, decisively, and completely than any human strategy could ever allow.
We wait, knowing the whirlwind is always poised.
We wait, knowing that the wicked may plot on their beds, but they may never see their pots get warm.
And now we confront the most ethically and morally challenging verse in the entire psalm.
It is.
One that demands significant time and careful interpretation, as we have to reconcile the harsh imagery with the concept of righteous joy.
This verse requires us to align our hearts with God's ultimate view of justice. The source material provided by the UNFIJ in Jesus team is very detailed here. Verse 10 states, "The righteous shall rejoice when he seeth the vengeance. He shall wash his feet in the blood of the wicked."
The phrase "rejoice when he seeth the vengeance" is difficult enough. It suggests a kind of satisfaction in suffering.
It does.
But the image of washing one's feet in blood sounds utterly barbaric. It seems to violate the Christian call to love our enemies. We have to tackle this apparent contradiction head-on.
It is essential to remember that this psalm is operating within the cultural and covenantal context of ancient warfare and judicial vindication. The rejoicing is emphatically not a cruel delight in the personal suffering of an individual.
So if it isn't cruel delight, what is the nature of this righteous joy?
It is the profound, overwhelming relief and celebration that comes from witnessing the absolute vindication of righteousness.
And the decisive overthrow of evil.
Exactly. When the calculating wickedness that had tormented the innocent is finally stopped, rendered toothless and swept away by the whirlwind, the joy is a celebration of God's character as the just and active judge.
Not the suffering of the punished.
Not at all. It is the joy that moral order, though seemingly violated for decades, has been irreversibly restored.
So the righteous are celebrating the end of injustice, not the pain of the wicked.
Precisely. And that second phrase, wash his feet in the blood of the wicked, must be understood as high-impact poetic hyperbole.
Derived from ancient battle imagery.
Right. In the ancient world, to wash your feet in the remnants of a defeated army symbolized a complete, total, and irreversible victory over a brutal, predatory enemy.
So the image, though shocking, signifies finality.
It does. It means the victory is so complete that the evidence of the enemy's total destruction is everywhere, validating that their predatory power has been utterly and decisively broken, never to oppress again. It's an assurance of security.
And this concept of celebrating God's righteous judgment carries through directly into the apocalyptic vision of the New Testament.
It does, proving that this rejoicing is rooted in eternal principles of justice. Let's look at the heavenly response in Revelation. It confirms the source of this joy is God's truth, not human malice.
Okay.
In Revelation chapter 19, verses 1-2, following the judgment and destruction of the great evil system, Babylon, the voice of heaven is heard.
And it says,
And after these things I heard a great voice of much people in heaven, saying, Alleluia, salvation and glory and honor and power unto the Lord our God. For true and righteous are his judgments. For he hath judged the great whore, which did corrupt the earth with her fornication, and hath avenged the blood of his servants at her hand.
that is the ultimate justification. The celebration is explicitly directed at the fact that God's judgments are true and righteous.
They are celebrating that God has avenged the blood of his servants. He has kept his promise, and the scales of justice, subverted by the wicked, have finally been balanced perfectly by the Almighty.
This leads us to the crucial application derived from the source material analysis by the You Need Faith in Jesus team.
The goal is to align our desires with God's. We must passionately long for the final universal victory of righteousness over corruption.
And this gives us the moral latitude to process our outrage over earthly injustices. We don't have to seek personal vengeance.
Because we know a perfect final resolution is coming. Our ultimate joy is secured not in retaliation, but in the final, comprehensive victory of Christ over all evil.
It allows us to release the burden of justice to the only one who can handle it flawlessly.
Exactly, and so we arrive at the conclusion of Psalm 58.
The powerful final verse that acts as the great summation. The inevitable public testimony that results from God's action. This verse provides the ultimate answer to that rhetorical question from verse 1.
The entire arc of David's journey, from the exposure of calculated violence to the whirlwind of judgment, it all bends toward this final, undeniable reality. Verse 11 reads, So that a man shall say, Verily there is a reward for the righteous. Verily he is a God that judgeth in the earth.
So that a man shall say. David is predicting a universal public acknowledgement.
He is. When people witness God's decisive and swift judgment, they will be forced to draw two profound conclusions that contradict the visible success of the wicked they see every day.
And the first profound conclusion vindicates the righteous path.
It does. For those who watch the corrupt flourish, the ones measuring out violence and succeeding financially and politically, it often seems futile to adhere to moral standards.
But the final judgment proves that there is, verily, a reward, a profound benefit, an everlasting vindication for serving God and enduring in righteousness.
Goodness is not futile. It is the ultimate wisdom.
And the second conclusion directly addresses the core spiritual crisis raised by the psalm, that feeling that God is distant or indifferent while evil thrives.
The public testimony will confirm, Verily he is a God that judgeth in the earth.
This is the ultimate reassurance drawn from the source material provided by the You Need Faith in Jesus team.
God is not remote. He is actively involved, exercising his authority as judge right here, within human history and in the affairs of men. He sees the corrupt assemblies, the calculated violence, and the deaf adders.
Yeah.
And he will act definitively.
His moral order is not optional.
No, it is the foundation of the universe and will be visibly upheld.
And the commentary reminds us that these acts of judgment aren't just punitive. They serve a crucial pedagogical purpose. They teach the world something about God's moral standards.
This teaching function is clearly outlined in Isaiah chapter 26, verse 9. It says, For when thy judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness.
That link is critical. The judgment isn't just the end of the wicked, it's a profound moral lesson for everyone else.
The entire world, by witnessing the consequences of calculated wickedness, will be forced to learn what righteousness actually looks like.
Confirming the eternal truth that serving God is the path of wisdom.
For the believer, this final verse, according to the analysis of the UNFIJ in Jesus team, provides profound confidence. Though the scales of earthly justice often fail, the final, swift, overwhelming judgment of God will vindicate his people and confirm to all observers that choosing righteousness is the only path that offers true and lasting reward.
It provides the spiritual ballast needed to live righteously while surrounded by the calculating cruelty of the world.
It does.
This has been a deeply detailed and challenging exploration of Psalm 58. We move from David's confrontation of corrupt authorities who are meticulously weighing violence in their hearts,
Through the startling reality of our inherent fallen nature.
and finally to the fierce, sanctified cry for divine intervention, certain that God's response will come swiftly, like a whirlwind seizing the pot before it gets warm.
The goal of this ancient psalm, powerfully interpreted through the source material provided by the UNFIJ in Jesus team, is to transfer our focus, to move it from the desperation of earthly corruption to the solid certainty of eternal active justice.
And the commentary gave us 3 key, immediate, practical takeaways that we can integrate into our daily lives today.
They're very actionable.
Let's reiterate those 3 actionable steps for the listener, summarizing our deep dive.
First, in response to the lesson on intentional evil from verse 2. Guard your heart against malice and selfishness. Conduct a daily moral audit, ensuring your plans are rooted in righteousness and not the subtle calculation of personal gain at the expense of fairness.
Second, against the backdrop of the deaf adder in verses 4 and 5. Keep your ears open and soft to truth and counsel. Actively resist the temptation to become stubborn or resistant when correction comes, whether from Scripture, conscience, or wise friends.
And finally, relating to the imprecatory prayers in verses 6 through 8. Entrust all demands for vengeance and justice entirely to God alone. Pray passionately for God to intervene and protect the vulnerable, channeling your righteous anger, but never seeking to execute personal retribution.
That is a remarkable synthesis. It brings the raw poetry of Psalm 58 right into the ethical reality of our daily choices.
And that leads to a final provocative thought, building on the conclusion that God judges in the earth, from verse 11, specifically so the world can learn righteousness, as it says in Isaiah.
Okay.
If the purpose of God's grand, final acts of judgment is to provide a public, undeniable lesson in moral truth, what small, immediate act of self-judgment, a conscious search of the heart for that last lingering piece of calculated selfishness, can you perform right now, today, to reflect that ultimate standard in your personal sphere of influence, to make your life a small lesson in righteousness for those around you?
Something to mull or explore on your own. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth exploration of the source material. We look forward to our next deep dive.